The heat pressed down like a punishment from God. In the cracked heart of the New Mexico territory, even the wind had claws, dry, hot, and mean. Dust swirled in devilish spirals, painting the horizon in a dirty haze. A creaking wagon rolled slowly along the scrub-choked trail, pulled by a pair of gaunt mules and watched by a pack of vultures overhead. Iron chains rattled inside, steady and cruel. She sat among the splinters and hay, her wrists raw from the manacles, her eyes steady and unblinking despite the sweat streaming down her face. Her long black hair was tangled, lips split from sun and silence. She was visibly pregnant, the child kicking beneath the folds of her stolen calico dress. The men who'd taken her joked crudely in Spanish and English, one tossing a bone to a dog just before spitting near her feet. 10 yards off the trail, leaning against a leaning post fence that barely stood on its own, a man squinted through the dust. Mid-30s, maybe 40. He wore the desert like a second skin, sun-scorched, weathered, hard. A low-brimmed hat shadowed his eyes, but the scar across his jawline was unmistakable. The townspeople called him Tracker, though no one could say where he came from, only that he always found what he was paid to find, and left quickly after. He chewed a sliver of mesquite bark, watching the wagon like it owed him something. He hadn't planned to be in La Cruz long. Just enough to swap out his tired horse, maybe down some whiskey if the saloon hadn't closed early again. He told himself he wasn't watching the girl, not really. He'd seen slaves before. Hell, he'd fought beside men who sold them. But this was different. She didn't look broken. From the porch of the trading post, a wiry man in a stained vest stepped down and called out to the driver. "That her? The one from Fort Defiance." "That's her," the slaver growled, wiping his brow. "Caught her west of Black Mesa. Killed 2 dogs trying to stop us. Got a price." The trader nodded. "More if she drops twins." He said it with the ease of a man counting barrels. The protagonist spat into the dust. There it was again. That sick heat in his chest. He tried to ignore it, but the memory bit hard. His little sister taken by raiders when he was 12. They never found her. Only the echo of her scream across the rocks. He pushed off the fence and started walking, not toward the wagon, but to the watering trough. Horses snorted as he passed, and his boots scuffed the dry earth. The bartender, an old Mexican with bad knees and a worse temper, caught his eye as he passed the saloon. "She is not yours," the old man said, voice like gravel. "Don't take what ain't yours to take." "She ain't theirs either," Tracker replied, low and tight. The old man nodded once. "That's the problem." At the trough, he cupped water into his hands and drank. He was stalling. Every minute he lingered was another cut to his pride, another reason to ride out and never look back. But he looked back anyway. The woman's head turned slightly, just enough to catch his gaze. Her stare didn't ask for rescue. It challenged him. "Do something or ride on," her eyes said. "Just don't pretend you don't see." A bell rang. The trade was done. The slaver mounted up, taking his coin, whistling as if he'd just sold a crate of dried beans. The trader barked at a boy to bring the woman to the back quarters, where they'd keep her cool. Tracker's fingers tightened into fists. His heart pounded loud in his ears. He heard the old bartender again in his mind, something he used to mutter during dry summers. Asterisk, even snakes have to drink. But the well don't forgive 'em. Asterisk. By nightfall the town was quiet. The sun had slipped behind the mesas, bleeding color across the land. Crickets chirped. A coyote howled somewhere distant. He waited in the shadows near the stables, watching the trader's quarters where they kept her locked. He'd counted 2 guards, both drunk. One had nodded off with his boots still on. He didn't have a plan. He only had the itch behind his ribs and the growing certainty that if he didn't do something, he'd rot from the inside out. A door creaked open. The woman stood in the frame, backlit by lamplight. Her wrists were still bound but loosely now. She looked around, then stepped out quietly, belly heavy with caution. She didn't see him until she nearly stumbled over his crouched form. She froze, ready to bolt. "Quiet," he whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't move, just stared with wild eyes. "I got a horse," he said. "But we move now or not at all." Still she didn't answer. "You come or you stay. Ain't got time to argue." Behind them, a bottle smashed inside. One of the guards started yelling about cards and cheatin'. She looked toward the noise, then back at him. She nodded. He cut her binds with a worn knife, motioned for her to follow. They moved quick but low, the dust muffling their steps. The horse was saddled and waiting, water skins packed. As they reached it, a voice called out behind them, drunken, slurred. "Hey, that's my..." Tracker didn't hesitate. He swung the butt of his rifle up and cracked it across the man's temple. The slaver dropped like a sack of flour. The woman flinched, then climbed into the saddle behind him. They rode out hard, the wind biting at their faces, hooves thundering like distant war drums. The moon rose, white and watchful. For miles neither spoke. The land stretched ahead, vast, open, wild. She clung to him with one arm, the other cradling her belly. He knew the riders would come at dawn. Slavers didn't take theft lightly, and she was valuable. Pregnant women fetched the highest price in the southern markets. But he dealt with worse. Men like that only understood two things: blood and fire. An hour before sunrise, they stopped in a shallow arroyo lined with scrub oak. The horse needed rest. So did she. He built a small fire, just enough for warmth, and handed her a chunk of dried venison. She ate slowly, eyes wary. He gave her water. She drank deep. "I ain't expecting gratitude," he muttered. "Just figured you deserved a chance." She looked at him, then really looked. Her voice, when it came, was rough but strong. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames. "Had a sister once. Lost her to men like them. Ain't saying I'm no hero. Just can't let it happen again." She said nothing, but her gaze softened slightly. The silence between them wasn't empty, it breathed. The baby shifted in her belly. She winced and braced her hand against a rock. He noticed and stood quickly, awkward. "You all right?" "Soon," she said. He nodded, unsure what else to offer. She lay down beside the fire, turning on her side. Her breath slowed. In the pale light, he saw the dirt on her skin, the bruises on her wrists, the fierceness in her stillness. Not broken. Not begging. Just enduring. He watched the horizon, eyes sharp. Every creak of brush could be a scout. Every howl might mask a man's whistle. But in the middle of that harsh, sleeping land, something unexpected flickered. He wasn't sure if it was hope, or if it was too late for that. When he finally lay back beside the fire, his rifle across his chest, he glanced toward her once more. She was watching him again. She spoke quietly this time. "They'll come. I know. You'll fight. If I have to." She closed her eyes, her voice barely above the wind. "You will." He didn't sleep much, but when he did, his dreams were different. No screaming. No blood. Just the sound of tiny feet running through tall grass and laughter. By morning, the desert would wake hungry, and someone would be hunting them. But for now, in this quiet hollow, a man who never cared for anything had chosen to stay. He didn't know what kind of father he could be. Hell, he wasn't even sure he was still a decent man. But he'd bought their time with blood and fire. And he wasn't about to waste it. The morning cracked open with fire. Gunshots rang out in the distance, sharp, cruel echoes bouncing off the canyon walls like war drums. The man jerked awake, rifle already in hand. He scanned the ridge above them, his body tense, senses on fire. The woman was already sitting up, one hand on her belly, the other gripping a sharp stone she'd found in the night. They hadn't come early. They'd come exactly when he expected. 4 riders. Maybe more. Dust tails curled behind them as they galloped the trail below, cutting toward the river crossing. Smart bastards trying to head them off. He stood, quickly dousing the fire with sand. "We move." She nodded without argument. Her face was pale, sweat already forming on her brow, and she was favoring her side like something had shifted wrong inside. Still, she didn't complain. She rose and steadied herself. "Ride or run?" she asked. "Ride. For now." The horse had rested enough to carry them, though barely. As they mounted, the man cast a final glance at the arroyo they'd slept in. It was no longer a hiding place. It was a grave waiting to be dug. He pressed his heels to the gelding's sides. They rode west, toward the red cliffs where no trail marked the way, only animal tracks and old memories. The woman's breathing turned ragged after an hour. Her hands clenched around his waist, fingers digging through the leather of his duster. He didn't say anything. No use in asking how bad it was. He already knew. "She's coming," the woman finally said. "She. My daughter. I can feel her. Too early." He slowed the horse by instinct. The baby wasn't supposed to come now, not here, not like this. He scanned the jagged terrain ahead. One place came to mind, a forgotten cave near Coyote Ridge where outlaws used to hole up. If it was still there, they might have a shot. He didn't speak as they rode, just focused. His thoughts moved fast. Water, warmth, shelter, time. The storm wasn't behind them anymore. It was inside her now, and it was coming fast. They reached the base of the ridge by midday. The cave yawned just as he remembered, tucked into the stone like a secret. He dismounted and helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled and she gritted her teeth, face clenched in pain. He carried her inside. The cave wasn't much, stone walls, damp shadows, the smell of old bats, but it was out of the sun and out of sight. That was enough. He laid her gently on a wool blanket he kept in the saddlebag, then lit a lantern to chase off the gloom. She rolled onto her side, moaning softly now. Not loud. Not wild. Just the sound of someone walking through fire on bare feet. He set up quick water, cloth strips, boiled his knife with whiskey. His hands shook. Not from fear. From memory. He'd never delivered a baby before, but he'd watched a woman die trying, and the images never left. I need to help you, he said, crouching beside her. She didn't speak, just nodded. The birth came on like thunder. Hard. Bloody. He did what she told him, listen when she yelled. Her voice was a whip. Her strength, terrifying. Hours passed in a haze of pain and sweat. Then a scream, high-pitched and desperate. A baby's scream. A girl. The man stared, stunned, as the child emerged, slick and squirming. He wrapped her in his neckerchief and passed her to the mother. The woman held the infant close, whispering in her native tongue, a prayer or a promise. Her tears fell fast, not from weakness but from something bigger, relief, maybe, or defiance. Strong, she whispered, looking down at her daughter. She's strong. The man nodded, unsure what to do with the ache in his chest. Then the second pain began. The woman cried out, different this time. Lower. He turned sharply, realization dawning. Another? She nodded, jaw tight. I told you. The second child was slower. Harder. There was more blood. Much more. By the time the second infant came, a boy, the woman's head was lolling to the side. She was conscious but barely. He handed her the boy. She cradled both children to her chest, eyelids fluttering. You stay with me, the man said. You fight just like you did last night. She looked up at him, lips cracked. No name for them yet. Then don't die till you give them. She chuckled weakly. You sound angry. I am. She closed her eyes, murmuring again in Navajo, her fingers curling around her children. The man tore open his last canteen and gave her water, drop by drop. She drank. Not enough but some. Her breathing steadied. Outside the wind howled. Night fell fast. No stars. Just clouds thick with warning. He sat by the entrance with his rifle across his lap, watching for movement. Any movement. Footsteps. The slavers hadn't caught them yet, but they would. He was sure of it. And now, with 2 newborns and a half-dead mother, he wasn't sure what the hell he'd do. Inside, the babies whimpered, mewling like cubs. The woman shushed them softly, her voice rough silk. The man turned and stared at them. Strange thing, he didn't feel like a savior. He felt like a thread barely holding. She caught him looking. What are you? She asked, voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Then, I was a bounty man. Tracked murderers, thieves, deserters. Got good at finding the broken pieces. And now, he shrugged. Now I'm just tired of leaving people behind. She smiled faintly. Your name? He hesitated, then spoke it just once. A name long buried. She nodded, then repeated it quietly, sealing it in her mind. I had a husband, she said. He died during the sickness. Then they came. Took me like I was cattle. I know. She looked down at the babies, touching their tiny hands. They don't get to grow up in chains. Not these 2. They won't. Promise me. He met her eyes. You have it. Thunder cracked in the distance. Real thunder this time. He stood and looked out across the ridge. A shadow moved far below. Then another. The riders were back. He returned to the cave and dropped to his knees beside her. I have to go outside. I won't let them get near you. Her hand found his wrist. Don't die. No promises. She let him go. Outside, he wrapped a strip of cloth around his neck, checked his rifle, then moved into the dark like a ghost. He found a rise in the rocks and took position. 2 riders. Then 3. They weren't trying to sneak. They thought he'd be running scared, maybe alone. He watched their silhouettes against the faint lightning flicker. They dismounted, spread out. He fired the first shot clean. Took one in the throat. The second ducked and returned fire. A bullet sparked off the stone inches from his head. The third tried flanking. He shifted position, breath shallow, heart hammering like a drum in his ears. Waited. Another bolt of lightning lit the sky. He fired again. Another man fell. Then silence. One left. He moved like a cat, knife in hand, creeping through brush. The man knew the rhythm of killers. He knew how they smelled, how they moved. He waited until he saw the glint of the knife. Then he struck, elbow to jaw, knee to stomach. They grappled in the dirt, blood and grit mixing in their teeth. No words. Just grunts. Desperation. He brought the butt of his rifle down once. Twice. 3 times. Then the body went still. Breathing hard, he stumbled back to the cave. She was still awake, barely. The babies were asleep now, pressed against her sides. "Is it over?" she asked. "For tonight." She reached for his hand. "You stayed." "I did." Her eyes began to close. "I think I have names." He waited. One for each world. One for the desert, one for the storm. Then she drifted into sleep, her breathing slow but steady. He sat by the entrance again, the rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the mouth of the world beyond. And for the first time in years he didn't feel like running. By dawn, the storm had passed, but the world it left behind felt cracked and unfamiliar. He stood outside the cave, watching the sun rise like a blood orange, bruised and swollen over the jagged horizon. Dust still clung to the air, turning the sky a sick shade of gray, like a bruise that refused to fade. Behind him the babies stirred. A soft whimper, then silence again. Their mother hadn't moved since just before midnight. Still breathing but slow. Faint. He knelt beside her, brushing her tangled hair from her forehead. Her skin burned hot under his touch. Fever. The kind that didn't forgive weakness. He checked the saddlebag for quinine. Nothing. Just an old tin of beans, a flask with a swallow of whiskey and 2 bullets. Useless against sickness. She opened her eyes just barely. "They're hungry. I'll find something. Promise?" "I said I will." Outside the land stretched wide and bare. He knew this terrain like he knew the lines on his hands. Coyote dens, rattlesnake holes, hidden springs that sometimes ran dry. But the nearest town was 2 days on foot, maybe more. And those children didn't have days. He took his rifle and headed toward the western ridge. There was game out there, maybe. Rabbits. Lizards. Something with blood and bones. He moved quiet, careful, listening to the wind like it carried answers. His boots slid across loose shale as he climbed. At the top, he paused, scouting the valley beyond. Movement. A cluster of antelope, thin but alive, grazing near a dry creek. A miracle. He dropped to his belly, took aim. The wind shifted. The rifle cracked once. The antelope scattered like ghosts. But one fell. He approached fast, blade already drawn. The kill was clean, through the heart. As he knelt to dress it, his hands worked automatically, but his mind stayed back in that cave with the woman, with the twins, with the fever crawling through her veins. He returned hours later with meat slung over his shoulder, bloody and steaming in the morning heat. The babies cried in sharp, bird-like pitches as he walked in. She hadn't the strength to hush them. "I got food," he said, as if the words alone could keep her tethered. She smiled weakly. "You were gone too long. They'll eat now. They need milk." He paused, then nodded. He built a small fire, careful to keep the smoke low. Sliced the meat thin and slow-roasted it. As it cooked, he thought about the old medicine woman he'd once met near Fort Defiance. She'd taught him how to brew milkweed tea and goat's milk for orphan pups. He had no goat, no milkweed, but he had instinct. And the will to keep them alive. He ground the meat down with water into a thin paste, careful to strain it. He let the drops cool before easing them into the infants' mouths using a hollowed reed. It wasn't much, but they swallowed. They lived. That was all that mattered. The woman watched him, pride and pain mingling in her expression. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect? Someone who'd leave." "I tried. But you didn't." He stared into the flames. "I was a bastard before this. Maybe I still am. But I'm trying not to be. You already changed. Not enough." She touched his hand. "You changed for them." He looked at the children. They were so small. So loud for something so helpless. Their hands curled like leaves, their eyes shut tight. Life refusing to give up. That night, he cleaned his knife, polished the rifle, checked the path below the ridge for signs of movement. There were none. Either the remaining slavers had turned back or were regrouping. But there was no trust in quiet. Only delay. In the days that followed, the fever waxed and waned. Sometimes she spoke in full sentences, laughing weakly. Sometimes she shivered, lips cracked and eyes glassy. The man did what he could, cooled her with wet cloth, brewed pine needle tea, whispered stories of things he barely remembered. He told her about a time he'd ridden across the border, chasing a man who'd killed his brother. "I caught him in a cantina. He didn't beg. Just looked me in the eye and nodded. I still don't know if he wanted to die or was just ready. Did you kill him? No. Left him for the Federals. Thought it'd be worse. And your brother? Dead's dead. Nothing fixes it. She looked at him. Some things heal. If you let them. He didn't answer. Just fed the fire. The third day the woman tried to stand. He stopped her. I need to move, she said. You'll tear something inside. I already did. But I need to move. He helped her up slowly. Her legs trembled, but she stood. Briefly. Long enough to make her point. She was still alive. Tomorrow, he said. We ride to the water spring. Get you clean. Get them cooled. And then? We go north. She frowned. Why north? There's a widow I knew runs a safe place near Chinley. She hides people. Keeps them fed. She'll help. You trust her? No. But I owe her. That night the coyotes howled closer. The man sat with his back to the cave wall, rifle in arms, listening to every rustle of leaves. His fingers never stopped twitching. The old instincts were back and sharper than before. Not just survival now. Protection. Not for himself. For them. The babies cried again. He moved to them, clumsy but gentle. He cradled the boy in one arm, the girl in the other. They quieted, blinking up at him like he was the only sky they'd ever seen. He whispered, I don't know who I'm supposed to be to you, but I'll be someone. I swear it. The woman smiled through her fever. You already are. Morning came too soon. The fire died out in the early hours, leaving only coals and the scent of ash. He rose and packed quickly, blanket, rifle, meat. The horse was gone. Spooked or taken. Didn't matter. They'd walk. He fashioned a sling from canvas and carried both infants tight against his chest. She leaned on him as they moved slowly down the ridge. The sun was already blazing, a cruel God watching without mercy. But they walked. One step. Then another. By midday they reached the spring. It was nearly dry, just a muddy pool in a shaded ravine. But enough. He helped her bathe. Washed the babies. Cleaned the cloths and the blade. The moment felt like something sacred. A baptism into a world that had no place for grace but offered it anyway. As she lay on the rock afterward, drying in the sun, she whispered, They need names. You said that before. I've decided. He waited. The girl, call her Asha, means sunlight. And the boy, Dolly, means bluebird. He was the second, but he came through the fire singing. He repeated the names softly. Asha, Dolly. They're good names. She nodded. Names with wings. As the sun dipped behind the cliffs, they set up camp beside the spring. No fire. Just the hush of wind and the slow song of crickets. The children slept between them, swaddled in wool and sweat. She turned to him. If I don't wake tomorrow? You will. But if I don't? He looked at her. Steady. Tired. Fierce. You'll wake. What if? He didn't answer. You take them. Raise them. Make sure they don't forget who they are. Navajo. Free. He placed a hand on her shoulder. They'll know. The stars came out like 1,000 silent witnesses. He lay on his back, eyes open, the night sky pressing down. The weight of it all settled into his bones. Not just the journey, not just the danger, but the knowledge that this was no longer about escape. It was about becoming something else. He had lived half a life on the edge of a blade. Now he was walking a different one. And somehow, without realizing, he'd become more than just a man with a past. He'd become a father with a future. And the next step would demand more than blood. It would demand faith. The desert winds turned colder the farther north they walked. The sandstone cliffs loomed like quiet gods, watching from a distance, indifferent to the drama of the human world below. The man kept his pace steady, eyes scanning the ridge lines, ears tuned to every sound, bird calls, hoofbeats, whispers carried by the breeze. Each noise mattered now. Each could spell safety or death. The woman, weakened but upright, walked beside him. Her strength was coming back, though her steps were still soft, deliberate. She kept the twins close, wrapped against her chest in a sling made from his old serape. They no longer cried like before. Their breaths came steady, their eyes wide with that strange wisdom babies sometimes carry, like they understood they were meant to survive. He didn't speak much as they moved. The trail ahead was dangerous, but so was staying still. By the third day's march, the safe house near Chinley came into view, just a smudge of adobe walls and smoke curling lazily above the tree line. He remembered the place well. Years ago, it had been a hideout for outlaws, then a brothel, then something else entirely after the widow took it over. She wasn't a saint, but she had rules. No lawmen, no slavers, no killing within the walls. Still, he didn't trust her. He approached the gate near sundown, his rifle low but visible. The woman behind the gate didn't smile when she saw him. She folded her arms across her chest and nodded once. "You're late," she said. "You still got room?" "Depends who you brought. Someone who needs rest. And her children." The widow's eyes narrowed as they landed on the woman and the sling. "Twins?" He nodded. "Hell of a burden to drag through the desert. Better than leaving him." She opened the gate. Inside, the house smelled of smoke and boiled beans. A few other souls lingered in the courtyard, men with lined faces and hollow eyes, women who kept their hands on their knives even in laughter. This wasn't sanctuary in the holy sense, but it was enough. He settled them into a room near the back, a small one with a straw mat and a cracked window. The woman sat down heavily, cradling the babies. Relief mingled with exhaustion in her features. "They'll sleep well here," he said. "And you?" "I don't sleep." He stood near the door listening. The sounds of boots on stone. Of voices too low to make out. Then silence again. But silence never meant peace. That night, the widow pulled him aside. "You brought trouble, didn't you?" "Always do." "Who's after her?" "Slavers. Same ones who took her tribe. Thought they'd broken her. They didn't." "Why risk yourself for her?" He looked out over the dark courtyard. "Because if I didn't, I wouldn't be anything worth saving." The widow studied him for a long beat. "She's changing you." "No. I'm just remembering." She poured him a drink, then walked away. Later, as the moon rose, he slipped outside. Sat beneath a juniper tree with his rifle across his knees. Something about the stillness made his skin crawl. He didn't have to wait long. A coyote's howl, too sharp, too close. Then another. Then silence. He stood. A shadow broke from the brush. Then another. Men. Armed. Moving quiet. Too quiet. He was outnumbered. They'd followed him. He ducked back inside, heart thudding. Moved fast, silent. Woke the woman. She didn't ask questions. Just stood, babies in arms, ready. "We have to go." "The widow?" "She's not our fight." She nodded, holding Asha and Dolly tighter. He led them through the back, past the storage room, into the arroyo beyond the wall. The moonlight was sharp enough to sting. They slipped through sage and rock, moving uphill toward the pass. Behind them, the house erupted, shouts, gunshots, screams. He didn't look back. They climbed hard. The woman stumbled once, but didn't fall. He grabbed her arm, steadied her. "They'll follow," she said. "They'll try." At the top of the ridge, he stopped. Helped her settle behind a boulder. Passed her the smaller pistol he kept tucked beneath his belt. "You remember how to shoot?" She cocked it. "Better than you." He smiled. "Then keep that pointed downhill." The twins began to fuss. She shushed them softly, humming something low and ancient. He crouched beside her, rifle ready. Moments later, the first shape crested the hill. He fired. A man dropped. Then another came. He fired again. This time missed. The echo cracked through the canyon. They returned fire. Stones splintered beside his head. He dropped, rolled, fired again. Hit one in the leg. The man screamed, falling into the ravine. It was chaos, dust and bullets, and shouted names that didn't belong to anyone decent. The woman fired once, hit someone square in the chest. "They're flanking," she said. "I know." He checked his rounds. 2 left. He looked at her. Then at the children. He handed her the rifle. "You stay here." "What are you doing?" "Ending this." She grabbed his arm. "No. If I don't, they'll chase us forever. There's another way." "There isn't." He kissed Asha on the forehead. Then Dolly. Whispered something only they could hear. Then he turned and ran straight into the brush. He moved fast, drawing fire, leading them away. He knew the terrain. They didn't. He dipped through gullies, climbed ridges, led them deeper into the canyon. He could hear them cursing behind him. He stopped near a cliff's edge. Waited. Then stepped out, hands raised. The leader, grizzled, scarred, walked up slowly. Rifle aimed at his chest. "You," he growled. "You stole my property. They weren't yours. Everything out here belongs to someone. You think that makes you right?" The man spat. "She was broken when I bought her." "No. She just hadn't healed yet." Behind his back, the man's fingers brushed the knife tucked beneath his shirt. The slaver didn't notice. He was too busy grinning. "You got no bullets left. Don't need 'em." He lunged. Steel flashed. The knife slid between ribs, clean and fast. The slaver's eyes widened. He fell without grace. The others shouted. He ran again, zigzagging through the rocks. 2 chased. The others hesitated. He reached the cliff edge. Stopped. Turned. Waited. The first man came around the bend, rifle raised. He dropped flat as the shot cracked overhead. Then fired his last bullet. Straight into the second man's chest. The first froze. Then turned to run. The man let him. He returned at dawn, clothes torn, blood on his hands. She was waiting, the rifle still warm in her lap. The baby slept. He sat beside her. "Is it over?" she asked. "For now." He leaned back against the rock, head tilted toward the morning sun. He was exhausted. Hollowed out. But alive. "They won't stop," she said. "Then we won't either." They watched the light stretch over the canyon. She reached over and took his hand. "What now?" "Now," he said, "we find a place where the kids don't have to run." "You think that exists?" "We'll build it. And if someone comes again? Then I hope they know how to bleed." She laughed, weak but real. They sat in silence for a long while. No more words. Just the slow warmth of something sacred settling in, family, forged not in peace but in fire. When they finally stood to leave, the sun was high, and the canyon below glowed gold. They walked together, slow but sure. Two survivors. Two parents. And two small souls born in a world that tried to kill them before they could speak. But they had lived. And now they would grow. Behind them, the past burned quietly, reduced to ash. Ahead, the future waited, unknown, wild, and wide open. Years passed, but the wind still carried the scent of sage and dust, as if the land itself remembered everything. The man had built the house with his own hands, log by log, stone by stone, tucked into the quiet folds of a green valley far from the path of slavers, soldiers, or anyone else who might bring ruin. No signs pointed to it. No trail led there. You had to know it was there. And only a few ever would. The woman, stronger now than she had ever been, tended a small garden that grew stubbornly despite the rocky soil. Corn, squash, beans, what her people had always known. The earth didn't give easily, but it gave enough. She sang to it in the old language, sometimes low and rhythmic, sometimes just under her breath. The kind of song meant more for the soil than for years. The twins grew fast. Asha, always the quiet one with eyes that saw what others missed. Dolly, loud and wild and forever climbing trees or chasing lizards. They were different in every way, yet inseparable. And in their eyes, the man and the woman saw the proof that what they had done, the choices made in fire, in blood, in grief, had been worth it. Their home had no lock on the door. Not because they were naive, but because fear no longer ruled them. The man had built traps along the ridges, just in case, but over time he stopped checking them. Eventually he even forgot where some were buried. Neighbors came slowly. A retired cavalryman with a wooden leg who didn't ask questions. A widow with 3 children and a horse she talked to like a person. An old blacksmith who never smiled but gave the boy his first pocket knife and taught the girl how to use it better than most grown men. A small community bloomed there in secret, bound by quiet respect and scars too deep to explain. Every evening, as the light faded behind the hills, the man would sit on the porch, sharpening tools or carving small toys for the twins. The woman would sit beside him, weaving blankets, her fingers moving with a kind of calm that only comes after surviving something terrible. They didn't talk about the past much. It lived behind their eyes, in small silences, in the way their hands would find each other without thinking. On the 5th spring after their escape, a rider came down the trail at dusk. The man tensed. Old instincts never truly vanished, but the rider raised a hand in peace. It was the widow from the safe house near Chinley. She hadn't aged much, but her eyes carried more weight. "I heard a whisper," she said, dismounting. "Thought I'd see if it was true." The man nodded once. "It is." The woman offered her food. The children ran circles around the visitor. Dolly had a wooden gun and insisted on showing it off with dramatic flair. Asha, more reserved, simply watched. That night they sat around a fire and the widow told stories, some true, some not. She spoke of slavers who vanished in the night, of outlaws who never returned from raids, of a shadow that rode the canyons, protecting the innocent and punishing the cruel. Some said it was one man. Others swore it was a ghost. The woman smiled at that. "We were never ghosts," she said. "We were just too angry to die." The widow raised her glass. To anger then. And to staying alive. The man didn't smile often, but he smiled then. In the years that followed, the children grew strong. Asha became a tracker, quiet and precise. Her father taught her how to read the ground, how to follow prints in dust no wider than a blade of grass. Dolly took after his mother, bold, fast, and fiery. He built traps better than his father, hunted with a bow instead of a rifle, and carved beads from bone with his own fingers. One summer, a group of strangers came through the valley. They carried rifles and talked loud. Said they were mapping the territory for a new railroad. The man listened. Wash. Then told them kindly that they were on sacred land and they'd best keep riding. They laughed. Until the woman stepped from the house, twins at her side, and said nothing, just looked. Her silence said everything. The strangers left before nightfall. They never came back. On cold nights, when the stars sharpened in the black sky, the family would sit around a low fire, and the woman would tell stories, not of suffering but of origins. The kind passed down from her grandmother's grandmother. Stories of coyote and raven, of sacred mountains and spirit rivers. The twins listened with wide eyes, even after they were too old to pretend they still believed. The man never interrupted. He just listened, letting the words settle into his bones like old music. Once Asha asked him, "Do you believe them? The stories?" He looked at the fire. Then at the girl who bore his name, and the boy who had her mother's laugh. "I didn't used to," he said. "Now I believe in what keeps us warm." One morning years later, the man woke before dawn. The world was quiet, heavy with dew. He went outside, sat on the porch, and watched the horizon change color. His beard was streaked with gray now. His hands no longer trembled when he remembered. There was peace in him. Hard-earned. Undeniable. The woman stepped out with 2 cups of coffee, handed him one. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. They sat there until the sun touched the rim of the world. It was good. It was enough. They had carved out a place not just to live, but to be. Not haunted. Not hunted. Just whole. Together. And when travelers sometimes passed through, tired, desperate, afraid, they were taken in without questions. Federal. Given rest. Then pointed onward with words that always ended the same. Keep moving. And never let anyone tell you who you are. Because once, long ago, a man and a woman with nothing but each other and 2 newborns had outrun hell itself. And when they stopped running, they built heaven right where they stood.